Welcome to the show. My name is Karen Holton. I am an ET experiencer and ambassador, an ascension coach, a direct channel, a shamanic guide, and I'm the host of Aliens and Astrology. Be sure to check out more of my unique content on my website, www.karenholtonhealthcoach.com, and my YouTube, Odyssey, and Telegram channels, Karen Holton TV. I can also be found on the Forbidden Knowledge News Network, www.forbiddenknowledge.news. My paranormal experiences have taught me to replace my beliefs with working theories, which evolve over time. My co-host is Dave Petrella, and although we hold two different viewpoints, we both see things from the same broad perspective, and we are both passionate about the ascension process.
Hi, I'm Dave Petrella. I'm an astrologer, biologist, spiritual guide, and Oak Island theorist. You can find me on Facebook and YouTube at Dave Petrella, and on Instagram at Dave Petrella12. Please feel free to send me an email through my YouTube page. I'm happy to join Karen in our search for truth. We can find the answers we're looking for about health, science, extraterrestrial intelligence, and many other related topics. We're glad to have you join us today for the show. Hey everyone, welcome to Aliens and Astrology. This is episode 7. We have our special guest, Aurora Seraphine. It's my friend also, and Karen's friend. She's appeared many times also on the Quantum Guide Show. And today we're going to be discussing ancient Wisconsin. Now I did a really long cross-country trip. You guys probably remember from some of the previous shows me and Karen have been doing. I've been remote for a lot of the shows, and I'm finally actually in a house, so I'm really thrilled about that. And so in any case, I went through Wisconsin, and Aurora actually spent some time growing up in Wisconsin. And so there were a lot of ancient sites that she spent time at. And I had the chance to go to many of them. And so I asked Aurora which ones, I should check out. And I ended up going to about 4 of them, 4 or 5 of them, actually. And so I asked Aurora to be on the show. She, of course, said yes, and she was happy to talk about Wisconsin. It's not a topic people really cover a lot, like ancient Wisconsin. It's kind of a gem, so like a diamond in the rough. So I'm really excited to kick this off. So I'd like to introduce Aurora. She's the founder of Divine Alchemy Temple Arts, the spiritual healing arts practice offering numerous ways to heal and grow, both in person and remotely. She is an integrative holistic healing practitioner, unifying many modalities and sacred traditions. With a lifelong sensitivity to energy and the other realms, she naturally gravitated to the healing arts. In 2007, she co-founded a healing, training, and events center for subtle energy practices and paradigm busting gatherings. She is an essential oil alchemist, massage and body worker, intuitive healer, and advanced energy worker. Aurora is also a hypnotist, conscious musician, deep trance sound healer, and vocal alchemist. In 2013, she developed a sound healing technique called sonoluminous divine entrainment, designed to support people in accessing specific brainwave states through frequency and guiding them to source-generated healing by creating new neural pathways. Aurora is also a writer, speaker, mother of 2, advocate for organic high vibe living and spirit directed pregnancy and birth. And actually, I'll just comment on that really quickly. I heard the show that Karen and Aurora did on pregnancy, and it was actually amazing. And me being a male, it gives me really good perspective. But just to hear alternatives to maybe like a mostly hospital centered birth, doing things maybe more like the natural way, it's really key and it feels, right for a lot of people. So that show was really good. I really encourage people to check out Karen's Quantum Guide show, where her and Aurora talked about pregnancy. It was really excellent. Okay, Aurora is an avid researcher of ancient texts, civilizations, and traditions, and she loves bridging the worlds of science and spirituality through the quantum. It is Aurora's commitment to align with the inner divine, to support herself and others in becoming the most tuned in, radiant versions of themselves, awakened to the reality of heaven on earth. Now, I just want to say one last thing. Me and Aurora actually met last April at William Henry's Ascension conference in Nashville, Tennessee. People probably know him from the show Ancient Aliens. He's I think the main contributor. He's one of the producers for the show. Ancient Aliens has been on TV for a long time. It's actually kind of was my introduction to the spiritual realms. It's a really like gradually uphill introduction. It kind of introduces you to the concepts at a really reasonable pace. And then that was kind of one of my bedrocks for understanding the spiritual traditions in the beginning. And also the alien component, which of course me and Karen cover all the time. It's one of the most important parts of the show. And so we both had interest in that, and we met in Nashville, and we've been friends ever since. So welcome, Aurora. Thanks for coming to our show. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, and thanks for such a great introduction. Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Sure, you're welcome.
Yeah,
yep.
Great to have you, Aurora.
Thank you, Karen. It's so good to see you guys.
Okay, Karen, so I think we got a slideshow, right, of some pictures here. Okay, so just to set this up a little bit, Aurora took a lot of pictures at these ancient sites in Wisconsin, and I actually asked her which ones I should go to, because I was heading, after I did my research in New England, I headed through the Midwest, and I said, all right, this is actually like literally the perfect opportunity, and I'm not over there very often. And it's very cold for a fair amount of the year. So I said, this is like my one window to do this. And so all of these sites are actually in southern Wisconsin. It's a very kind of narrow band across southern Wisconsin. I went to, I guess, all of them except one that Aurora went to. And then I also went to an additional one. I'm not sure if Aurora went to, but we'll talk about that kind of towards the end of the presentation. It's just really interesting, because first of all, I had no idea that there was even anything of interest in terms of like native sites, specific native sites in Wisconsin. I thought it was just, oh yeah, there's generally tribes up here and everything, just that they're all across the Americas, of course. But it turns out that there's actually some really interesting structures. There's lots of mythologies and interesting stories. There's even stories of giants and things. And I've heard that from multiple people, including people who are actually members of tribes up in Wisconsin as well. So I really jumped at the opportunity to check this out. And even actually, it's probably a good place to start it off. Even in northern Illinois, and I don't know if Aurora's been to this part, but I think it's Rockford, maybe, like Rockford, Illinois. It's pretty much like the town before you get to Wisconsin. I think it's like north central Illinois.
Yeah.
And oh, you know this one, Aurora? Okay. Yeah, so I was at the river there, and there's a little like park, and there were actually statues, stone statues of giants. They're called like stone giants. So if you go to an area, you pick up on the consciousness of the area as you kind of access what's going on there. So I was not expecting that. I had no idea that was there, and I saw them standing there, and I said, okay, so people are aware of these stories of these stone giants and these rock giants and even maybe non-rock giants, but there's a lot of stories of stone giants in Canada, actually. I don't know if you're aware of some of this, Karen, but specifically like in Eastern Canada, like Northeastern Canada, there's these stories of these stone giants that were somehow sentient. It's a very interesting story. So anyway, I crossed the Wisconsin line, and of course the sites are probably within like an hour once you cross from Illinois north into Wisconsin. And so Aurora grew up there. How long were you there for, Aurora?
Off and on for about 16 years.
Okay, so that's quite a chunk of time for sure.
Yeah.
And so you had a chance to visit all of the interesting sites. And so
Aurora, I mean, all is definitely an overstatement, because yeah, I mean, as many as I could, I'll say that, but for sure, I know I haven't even scratched the surface, because I think at one time there were over 15,000 mounds that are even like known about in Wisconsin alone. So there's no way I could have discovered everything, but yeah, a good number. But I even in Devil's Lake, which we'll get to, I still haven't seen everything probably that there is to see, because there's so many little nuances that you really have to look for.
Oh, definitely. And a lot of them are probably not in necessarily a state of preservation. You know, a lot of them are kind of like just sitting there, kind of forgotten. I wish we, as a culture, I wish we took more time with that. And if I had my way, that's definitely how it would be. But you know, maybe in the future, maybe we can kind of get towards that spot. I'm totally into conservation and trying to get to the bottom line, you know, of the story here. But just to give people an idea, Aurora mentioned that there's about 15,000 mounds in Wisconsin alone. What's really interesting is that, and I've been to so many of them, not just Wisconsin. I'm talking about all of the eastern seaboard. So, which means the Mississippi River all the way east, essentially. And even there's a few of them to the west of that too. But it's interesting because they kind of like abruptly stop. The furthest southwest is there's one in Texas called the Caddo Mounds. That's like the furthest southwest mound. And of course, I spent a lot of time in Texas, so I had time to visit there. That was actually before I got to Nashville, Aurora. That was the first one I did when I left Texas. All the way up through eastern Oklahoma. There's a bunch of them through there. But then like west of that, there's nothing. Part of the reason for that, of course, is the terrain abruptly changes and the material that's available is different. You end up starting to be in like the prairies and it starts to get drier. So some of it's because of that, but I'm not convinced that's the only reason. And I think it might be it might be a story of like continents colliding and stuff. I'm not convinced that the Americas was really one continent. I think they kind of amalgamated to form a large kind of landmass. So I think that the Mayan civilization was like potentially a continent unto itself. And I know that sounds strange to some people, but that's just the sense I get from it. Just the delineation, you know, saying how things are kind of laid out. But in any case, so I guess let's kick off the Wisconsin sites. I'm really excited about this. I've been waiting for this for like weeks, right?
I have a question before we get into it. And
okay,
we have all kinds of viewers with all different, you know, levels of understanding and learning. Can you explain to the viewers, what is a mound? What are we talking about? And how old are they? Just sort of a little bit of background before we get into the specifics on each of the sites. Would that be okay?
Oh yeah, definitely. Do you want to take that, or do you want me to take that?
Well, I can give you my perspective in the research that I've done, and I would love to hear any additions that you have. So mounds, I think they come in like 3 categories that they tend to categorize them. And a lot of people, you know, they are known, especially throughout the Midwest, but then as he was saying, you know, all the way through the east of the United States. A lot of people call them effigy mounds. Now, throughout our modern culture, many people associate them with burial mounds, but if you start digging a little deeper, you come to realize that they're actually, most of them are not burial mounds at all. And they, you know, many of them are laid out in such a way that they, you know, have certain energetic alignments or cosmological alignments, things like that. But there are typically 3 styles of mounds. There's a flat top mound, there's conical or cone-shaped mounds, and then sometimes there are like animal-shaped, or, you know, something that represents a certain figure. So yeah, so that's what I would have to say about them. So it is interesting too that there are certain astrological alignments that you can find in many of these sites, and that they tend to follow certain lines of energy, just like many sacred sites that you find around the rest of the world.
Yeah, definitely. And they're also, excuse me, they're also often associated with some kind of a water body or a river or a stream, you know, because you have to have access to obviously food and transportation and stuff like that. It's kind of basic for most native tribes anyway. Although there's a question of whether they're even native at all. because some of the natives say, no, we didn't do that. We actually found that when we moved into the area. So, yeah, there's a lot of question here, and it just goes, of course, people know how I do research. You have to go in open-minded, have your tool belt, know what you're doing, know what you're looking for. You want to record the data. But when I go in, I have no idea what I'm going to find. I literally have absolutely no idea. I don't have a bias, which I spent, my whole life figuring out how to do that. Go in, I don't know what it is, maybe this is what I think, but I'm not sticking to, I don't stick to anything if I don't have data, and that's called good science. So you can have your opinion, but if you want to figure out what's actually going on, you need good evidence backing that up. And there's, the scientific method allows you to get into that. So yeah, I agree 100% with Aurora. And the only other thing I'll really add is that, well, I already mentioned we don't technically even know who necessarily built them. There's me and Aurora have talked about actually connections possibly to Atlantis, which is a really kind of fanciful idea about where they came from. Some people think it was the Welsh that did it. Some people think it was the Irish that did it. Some people think it was the ancient Hebrews that came over here that did it. For instance, the LDS tradition talks about that. So it's like, maybe it's some of all of them, seriously, because when you go up to these sites, and if you move into an area and you see something, you might try to like emulate that, and maybe you're going to build something that's similar to that, or that kind of references that because you saw it. Maybe you didn't come up with it. Maybe you would like develop the idea. So it can be any of these things. There are quite a few that do have some burial associations that definitely happened. We know that for a fact. Not all of them, definitely not all of them. Some were just ceremonial. Some had houses built on top of them for like the chiefs and everything. He would be, for instance, in Cahokia, I know Aurora knows about this too. They called the chieftain the Great Sun, and he lives on the top of the 100-foot mound. And I think we on top of that. You can see St. Louis.
Mound.
Oh yeah, you can see St. Louis in the distance and everything. It's a really great viewpoint for various things. But in any case, the only other part I want to say about it is that, and the alignments as well. I agree with that. There's many of them that are aligned. Some, seem like they might not be. But again, I think it's all kinds of cultures coming together over a very, very, very long period of time. And the other thing is that you have to work with the materials that are available to you. So for instance, like I was mentioning, when you get to like eastern Oklahoma, if you go too much further west, you're getting into some dry territory and you get into some elevation, and it really changes. And it changes, the soil changes. I mean, the rocks change, the organic matter changes, so everything shifts. But a lot of these mounds, the kind of general idea is that they had dirt and or clay, and also rocks, and also pebbles, built up on top in order to maintain the shape, so that they kind of lasted through time. A lot of them have actually, it's taken a long time, but sometimes the sides have collapsed because of, obviously, they're hundreds of years old, if not thousands of years old. And you've got rain events and wind events and stuff. So it's not, it's not like the Great Pyramids. This is not like a primarily stone structure, but excuse me, if you go south, obviously into Mexico and excuse me, guys. Sorry. If you go into south into Mexico and Central America, you're going to see primarily stone structures. And a lot of, I would argue a lot of that's because that's kind of what was available. It's, well, even in Mexico, it tends to be pretty dry for most of the country. And then when you get the Yucatan, you get some humidity, but you have access to like limestone and stuff. And the rock is very porous. And so it's probably fairly easy to build with that. So some of it's that too. But anyway, that's the general idea. And the last thing I'll say about it before we get into Wisconsin is that I personally think this is what it seems like, this is what it feels like to me, is that the powerhouse civilizations were actually in Mexico and Central America. These were like, we know the Aztecs, we know the Mayans were in the Yucatan, Aztecs were in Mexico, and then of course the Incans are further south. But even the Cherokee that I've talked to, me and Aurora actually went to a Cherokee site too, which was great, in North Carolina. The Cherokee say that they're from Colombia, like the modern country of Colombia, South America. So they say that they came up from the south. And when you look at the traditions, I mean, it's like unbelievable how developed it is. But I think sometimes when you look at what happened in the Americas, what you happen in the current United States area, is it's a little bit more, I find it to be a little bit more watered down. It's like kind of like yeah, they had the general ideas, but then they just did some other stuff and they weren't maybe necessarily as focused. I don't know if that's true necessarily, but all I know is when I see like Chichen Itza, I am like, wow, this is ridiculous. Now, when I saw Cahokia, I was like, wow, this is impressive, but I wasn't like, oh my goodness, like this is, how do you even do this? I mean, you've got like the stone carved, snakes and serpents and stuff in Central and South America. You don't necessarily have as much of that in the North, not North, yeah, well, North America, I would say, for the Americas. So it's a lot to think about, but maybe, and I hope by the end of this presentation, you guys will get kind of a feel for maybe what you think about it, because that's a large purpose of the show, is to get people thinking. And I don't want people to think, what necessarily believe what me or Karen or Aurora believes. Think for yourself by all means. Just look at the good evidence and pictures and decide what you think for yourself. Okay, so I guess we can go into the first couple slides, Karen. And I've kind of broken this up by site, and I had to think about it for a while, the best way to do this. But this one is called Rock Lake, right, Aurora? It's in Lake Mills, Wisconsin.
Yep.
And very close to Madison, I believe, just to the east of Madison, right? Maybe about like 45 minutes or 40 minutes or something.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, probably not even. Yeah.
okay, right. And so this is an area that Aurora has been to, and she actually encouraged me to go there, and I did go there. But I would like actually for Aurora, if you don't mind, to describe what this is all about.
Yeah. So from what I understand, sometime in the 1960s, and this is just in modern times, right? So sometime in the 1960s, I think it was like mid to late 1960s, but don't quote me on that. There had been a drought, and it came so low that the lake had descended so low that some of the tops of these pyramids were actually visible. So what you're seeing there in the center of that lake that looks like a pyramid is in fact a pyramid. And so from what I've heard from different researchers, divers, is that there's a whole pyramid complex here, but this is just what's the most visible. So there's many different theories, and obviously everybody always relates it back to, Native Americans or mound builders. But really, if you're looking by definition, and many of, indigenous cultures will tell you today that the mound builders actually predated their own civilizations. And we'll get into this, especially when we get to the Baraboo sites. So I'm not going to say anything more about that quite yet. But yeah, so these are rock. They're put together they're stone. So they're put together like stacked stone pyramids, from what I understand. And of course, there's always speculation, there's always questioning about authenticity of photographs and things like that, but there have been photographs that have been made from divers that are now readily available on the internet for you to actually see photos. There's actual walkways, just very similar to Bimini. If you're familiar with that road there, very similar in terms of the stones, the shape, the accuracy of how tightly everything's put together. It's no natural formation, that's for sure. It's definitely not something that's like happenstance. So, and like Dave was pointing to earlier, again, many of these cultures say, these were things that were here when we got here, or we are caretakers of these places. And so there's oftentimes, at least by the indigenous and people that take the time to dig into these stories and the rich history of these places, there's often a sacredness that's associated with them. And so for those with eyes to see and ears to hear, these are everywhere. And especially this area of the Midwest is just very steeped in these amazing sacred sites. So yeah, that's what I'll say about Rock Lake.
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of, I think, these underwater structures that we find, and actually I know that there's at least another one like this somewhere in the Great Lakes. I saw a show on that a while back. So it's like, it's not one, and like Aurora said, there's one in Bimini. There's supposedly roads. Some people think it's from Atlantis. There's Yonaguni over in Japan that people think was a giant, fortress structure of some nature. So like the way for me, it's pretty simple. I'm a very open person, and I really push the limits, but I keep the scientific bearing on everything that I do. But I think there was probably a large flood event, like every civilization talks about, and it covered, some of these structures all across the world. It was probably, I think, a worldwide event. And so, when you look at a lake like this, initially this would have been like a valley, basically, and there would have been hills around it. And valleys are often sacred, so you build a sacred site in the center of a valley, and you're surrounded on all sides by this rim. That's a very sacred a way to kind of structure a site. So I totally get that. Now, when I went there, I pulled up to the shore, and there's this little playground. You know where that is, Aurora? On the side of the shore there?
It's been a minute, so I can't think of it off the top of my head, but I believe you.
Okay, there's a nice little playground right there. There's like a metal fence, so you can't really I couldn't get like right down to the water at that access point. But I got right up to it, and I will say this, I did notice that the water was exceptionally clear. And I was thinking, I'm like, if I got over, maybe a little bit further to the center of the lake, I would probably see some stuff actually just with the naked eye, because it was very clear water. And I'm just standing there and just trying to get a feel for the area, and I couldn't really get close enough, but it fits with a lot of the ancient models about how there's submerged cities and submerged sites and things. So it's very fitting. And of course, when you see the amount of other structures in the area, it's astonishing just how much is there. So it's definitely not out of the question at all. And I also wish that we could actually I wish just for the whole world that we could get teams together of people who are just like, look, I just want to know what's going on. I don't have an agenda. I'm not being paid by anyone to say this. I want to just know, because this is our history. And if I'm wrong, I'm okay with that. I don't need to be right. I would be thrilled if Aurora was right instead of me. As long as someone is right and we can get to the bottom of it, that's what I care about. So I'm hoping to take research that way, and I'm certainly doing my part, and I'm trying to get teams together and stuff like that all the time. So hopefully some of these sites, in the future, not sooner rather than later, we can get to the bottom of some of this stuff.
Absolutely. I would also add to that too, that, I think even in terms of, like the 100th monkey effect, right? There's the idea that if enough of a collective accomplishes something, or sees that something can be accomplished, or is witness to something or whatever, there's sort of this tipping point where I think then the whole collective, it turns on for everybody. So with these ancient sites and everything that you were just describing about, how we really just want to know the truth of our history, of where we've come from, I think if people knew how advanced our civilization was at one time, and how advanced, our ancestors, or those that potentially brought us here, seeded us genetically, that conversation, that if we knew the potential that we have within our own DNA to do things like this, to create things like this, to be part of things like this, then I think that it would reawaken ancient memories within us to remember how to do these things, so which I think has the potential for great healing and, forward motion in terms of our own personal growth and evolution as a collective.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Yeah, that's completely right. There's better ways to do it, I think, and we just have to be on the mark, and we have to be serious about it, and we have to be respectful too. Every time I go into a site, I go in with full respect. If I get indications that I'm not welcome there, I will actually leave. Meaning that I'm talking about spiritual energies and things. I respect that so much that I'm just like, basically I go in, I'm like, how's it going, guys? Whoever's here, I'm happy to talk to you. If you're gonna be difficult, then actually I'm gonna leave, because I don't even want to be around that. And I'm not threatening you, and I'm not saying you need to leave or anything. I'm just saying, this is our world. We all share the world. I'm curious what's going on here. You know, if you want to help me out, help me understand. And a lot of them do. Actually, most of them do. Most of them don't say leave. Most of them are actually welcome, kind of a visitor who is trying to understand what happened.
That's a really important point, I think, too, because, and that's the same way that I go into it myself. Like I've just learned over the years that I have to have the same respect for those in the unseen that I would have for a human standing in front of me. That you have to have that same kind of empathy and respect and honor. And so I go in and I'm calling on the gatekeepers, I'm calling on the guardians, I'm calling on the local spirit, and I'm asking for support from them, but I'm also sharing my love and my gratitude and appreciation for them and what they've done to be able to be a part of co-creating or stewarding that space. And I feel like you said, when you go in with that kind of open heart and respect, you get much different results in terms of what you're shown, and then what you also get intuitively, because I literally mean what you're shown, because sometimes they will guide you to certain places where you're seeing something that no one's ever seen before. And so you may be guided to a place where there's petroglyphs or, something that no one's ever seen, but it takes that, reverence and ability to know, like, I go in knowing I don't know anything and ask to be shown. And yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point, because I've had that happen to me many times where I'm actually shown things that are like fairly far off of the trail. And there's no way, absolutely no way I would have found that if I wasn't kind of directed to be in that area. That actually happened to me in Georgia quite a bit, which is, it's not really a topic for today, but the northern mountains of Georgia, which is actually fairly close to North Carolina area. It's really, really magical place. I had a great time there. I had some serious revelations. And I was guided to things that were not on the trail, and I never would have found if I didn't have, well, I'm using my eyes too. I'm looking around and I'm saying, there's something going on here. I got to figure out what it is. And then I spend as much time as I need to like acclimate myself. You get comfortable with the energy, and then you start to kind of just move, where I would say the spirit guides you.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you have anything else about Rock Lake, Aurora?
No, not right off the top of my head. I'm not a historian, so I don't have all the ins and outs, but that's just, yeah. So that's about it.
Have you ever been on the lake in a boat or anything like that?
No.
Okay. Yeah, that's something I'd like to do, just to get out in the center of that, see what I feel. Because being on the shoreline is a little difficult. I can't really get the full energy. Okay, great. Well, we got a lot ahead. So the next segment of pictures is, of course, from I guess we got Aztalan next. And this is a site that I think Aurora particularly enjoyed. I have positive experiences mostly from the site as well. It's pretty striking. So if you'd like to describe it a little bit, Aurora, that'd be great.
Sure. So this happens to be one site that has ancient pyramids that are essentially, they're earthen pyramids. And now one of my hypotheses about earth pyramids is that I think there's a good possibility that some of them may predate certain stone pyramids, and that they're so old that they're now covered in earth, and that they've gone through degradation processes. Basically, they've started breaking down, and that at one time they very possibly could have been built up bigger and more elaborate than what we're seeing today, and that this is just the remnants. That's just personal feeling. This particular place is also surrounded by, that's not even accounted for because it's on private land, other structures that when you get close to north of Madison, you start getting closer to Baraboo, there's a lot of what they call bluffs in that area, which are like small mountainous formations, but they're like micro, right? Now, a lot of them surrounding that area and even going into the Baraboo area are pyramidal in shape. So, and not all of them, and I'm not trying to say that every hill is a pyramid, but I will say that when you see them at certain times of year, especially in the winter when all the leaves are off the trees and you can actually see through, there are certain hills that are very like nearly perfect pyramid shapes. And so it just so happens that I think some of these have been recognized for what they are, and some of them have not. So Aztlan, again, it's one of those sites that they'll tell you native burial grounds, but when I have asked people, like, so now in that area, they're called Ho-Chunk, but before they were also part of the Winnebago tribe. So some of their story is that this area was actually, these were some of the settlements that were brought there from the last deluge. And this is where the interesting Atlantean connection comes into play too, is that they say that their people, or the Wolf Clan, as they called themselves at that time, were brought over during that period of the last deluge from the east inland to a safe place that had already been established, that had, you know, sort of city centers, so to speak. They taught them agriculture, they taught them medicine, they taught them all of these different things, and they taught them about mound building and, you know, certain alignments and things like that. And this group of beings they called the water spirits. So, and they said that they were large in stature. And if you know any of the history about this area, you'll know that that also correlates with some of the interesting stories of people finding things like giant remains. And so when we get into this area in particular, especially even the whole Midwest, there have been stories and accounts, even like you can go back into the 1800s and there's newspaper article after newspaper article, photographs, all kinds of things of people actually finding giant skeletons. So there's a lot that ties into that, and it's a pretty deep rabbit hole. But for the sake of time, we'll stay focused at this site. So now let's see, how tall is this?
You're saying the pyramid?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's fairly sizable. I mean, I can't remember the exact amount, but I was standing at the base. Well, I think there's like 3 main structures, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. There's two close to the parking lot side, and one kind of like a long rectangle site, essentially. And like there's one over on the other side, and then there's 2 kind of next to each other. But I was standing at the base, and it's fairly big. I mean,
it really is. It doesn't, when you're down beneath it, or when you're on top of it, rather, it doesn't really look like a lot, but when you're standing on the bottom part and you're looking up, you can really see the size and the scope of how large this structure actually is, because it seems like a slow progression, and it's not that it's that toweringly tall, but the surface area is massive. So it's quite large. They've built, you know, a staircase for you to actually be able to climb up and go, and you can actually sit on the top. And I know some people have their feelings about not touching the mounds at all, but this is a very large, you know, it's kind of like, it'd be like walking on a pyramid. But yes, if you're going to do it, go with reverence. But and interestingly, what I was talking about earlier about calling upon the gatekeepers and things like that, this site actually taught me that. So the first time that I visited this site, you know, I went with curiosity and I went with an open heart, but I didn't go in. I wasn't like acknowledging the local spirit. I wasn't tuning in with them. I was kind of going in with my own agenda of curiosity, like, oh, I want to know more, but I'm not actually asking the site itself. And we forget that like these places are sentient. All life is sentient. And we have the ability, if we're tuned in to it, to ask, you know, to connect and communicate with the sentience of that place. So the first 2 times actually that I went here, I hadn't started doing that yet when I would go. And that's not to say that I didn't go in and have, my own ceremonious type of experience, because I would still appreciate things in that perspective. And I might still set up a crystal grid and do my own little blessing, but I didn't acknowledge them first. And so the first 2 times that I went, I actually left with a massive headache. And so one thing that I've discovered, besides what we're talking about in going in with reverence, is that when I recognize that these sites can be like tuning forks for us to actually tune in with the sacred energy of a certain land area at large. And if we go there with that reverence and respect, we can actually tune our own biofields, our own bodies, to actually sync up with the energy of that place, so that when we leave, we're in harmony. We're in harmony with that place. Just like drinking the local spring water would help you attune to the local energy of that place. Going to sacred sites like this will do the same. And if you go in and you're not open to receiving that energy and that having that transference be there, then your energy is going to, your field is going to feel super wonky, because you've got your own field going on and you're not playing with anything else. And so it's not giving you that chance to sync up with those energies and be in synergy or balance with it. So anyway, yeah, we can continue with the slides, I think.
Great. Yeah, let's check out some of the pictures of the site here so you guys can see the pyramids.
So that's me. And that's my son, actually. We didn't mind dressing him in pink. So that was almost 11 years ago.
So that's the main pyramid, kind of. You're standing close to the river there, or the stream.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. And she's pretty far away from that, guys. It's not really, there's a smaller pyramid kind of directly in front of that big one back there. I guess you guys are off to the side a little bit, maybe.
Off to the side. Yep.
Right. Yeah, great. But it's really, really green and beautiful. I mean, there's tons of grass and everywhere. It feels like really, really healthy. I really enjoyed my time there. What do we got for the next slide, Karen? Oh yeah, tell them about this, Aurora.
Yeah, so this, in the background, you can see the mound or the pyramid. And part of what my husband and I kind of like came together doing is doing grid work, holding ceremony, creating our own kind of blessings when we go to different sacred sites. So the crystal that you're seeing was a crystal that we would travel with from time to time. We don't have it anymore, but and we would, basically go and we would do like what we're talking about, go with respect and go with honor and share gratitude and intentions for this place to be appreciated, listened to, all of those things.
Yeah, and that's how we increase the energy of the earth grid, guys. You gotta put energy in too. Put positive energy, going with the respect, and it will give back to you. The land will give back to you. It'll energize the people in the land. I mean, it's amazing what we can do just to give attention to something that maybe hasn't been given the proper attention in a while. And if you give good energy into it, it's going to give back. It gives back to everyone, actually. It doesn't really discriminate. It's happy to bless all of us. Yeah, I love that picture because it's just such a striking crystal, and you can see I get feelings about crystals too, of course, that have to do with some of the Central and South American civilizations. We know about the crystal skulls and how they store huge amounts of energy and memories even, and all kinds of stuff. Very interesting. Great. Okay. What do we got next, Karen? Okay, this is just a sign of the site essentially. I think I took this one. It's not your picture, right, Aurora? I think this is my picture.
It's possible. Yeah.
You see how bright it was the day I was there. It was very sunny. I was very happy. I think it was September, so it was not like overly hot. But it was nice to get out of the sun because it was kind of out there I was out there for probably 2.5 hours, maybe, just kind of walking across the site. But it's just really green and beautiful and kind of serene. You know, it's just a nice looking area. I think we go to the next slide, Karen, if you don't mind. Okay, so this is the picture at the base, essentially. This is the base of the biggest pyramid. So I'm facing this one, and directly behind me is another smaller pyramid. And then behind that is actually the river. So they're actually kind of in a line with each other. But you have to go up, you know, a couple levels, and then you can see at the top there's a staircase Aurora was talking about. And I've had mixed feelings about climbing up pyramids and things, but again, you know, if I approach it, I get within like 50 feet of it, and I can feel if it's a positive experience or not. And if there's not a spirit that's saying we don't want you to do this, then I proceed with caution, I proceed with respect, and then if at any point I start feeling strange or something, I will definitely leave the area out of respect, and also because I don't want those experiences really. I want positive things happening. You know, I want good energy. But that gives you guys, and look at the sky. It's just beautiful, the blue and everything. It was so nice. This is Dairyland, right, Aurora? All the cows and cheese and milk and everything.
Yeah, that is correct.
Yeah.
There's a lot to be said too, about what you're talking about finding sites like this being close to the rivers too, because if you understand how water carries memory, it's very similar to the crystals, in the crystal skulls you're talking about, they hold information, they hold memory, so does water. And so if you're doing these blessings and these ceremonies and these intentions for the earth to, generate peace and generate, health and vitality, and, for spirit to descend in the minds and the hearts of humanity, and then those blessings are being carried into the water, they're going everywhere. The water's connected to everything and every being. And so I think that's part of the magic too. And, many of these sites are also electromagnetic in nature because of that. Because, mountains, they talk about, have these electrical properties, and water has a lot of magnetic properties. And so when you're combining the two, you're tapping into a lot of high potential energy that can, I think, have a great impact on consciousness.
Yeah, I agree 100%. You got the mountaintops, the energy gets centered at the top, coming off the telluric currents off the earth, and then absolutely the water carries everything. Water is, essential for life on Earth. So that's really well said. I appreciate that. Okay, what do we got for the next picture, Karen? I think we got maybe one or two more. All right, so this is from, I guess this is from the top of the pyramid. I was standing on the top of the big one, and you can see it goes down in increments, and then there's another small hill. That small hill is the second pyramid, and then past that, where kind of the tree line is, that's where the river is. So I was just, standing on top, and I didn't feel, I had an EMF detector with me. It measures electromagnetic frequencies, which is essentially electric fields, magnetic fields. It also measures actually two different types of magnetic fields, and then RF frequency, which is radio frequency, which is often like cell towers, but it can also be the spirit world, and I've had both happen. So it works for both. I didn't feel anything particularly strong myself. I will say that towards the river, if you remember those the stockades, Aurora, the big wooden posts that are put in the ground, supposedly there was a military component to this at some point. I tend to doubt it was initially that way, because initial cultures, I don't believe they don't deal with defensive stuff. They hold their energy properly and they let that broadcast. But I think that was maybe later on. But anyway, there's really large logs with pointed tops that are fit really closely together. They're very high. I mean, it's probably like 15 or 20 feet high, and it was formed around the city or the site at some point. And around that area, which is close to the river, I did feel a little bit of density. It was heavier than anywhere else on the site, and I actually didn't spend a lot of time down there. It wasn't that bad, but it was definitely a little heavier. Not heavy, but just slightly heavier than the rest of the site. So I do sense there was some struggle and strife going on and stuff like that. And sometimes when you feel density, it can mean there's just a lot that happened there, or there's a lot of spirits that don't have bodies that are still kind of hanging around the site. But did you feel any of that around that stockade, Aurora? You remember that?
Don't skip over this brief commercial break. Dave and I have some important information for you. You may have noticed that participation in our community does not depend on memberships or donations, and we do not hide our episodes behind a paywall. We want everyone to have the opportunity to learn and share our important content with others. Dave and I both offer services which may make your journey more fulfilling, and I offer some products as well. Our sales and services are what provide us with the means to continue our work, as there are many expenses associated with our mission. Check out our offerings to find that which resonates with you to help create a win-win situation. What I mean by that is financial support to help cover our expenses, but also some great products and services to give you that edge that you've been looking for. Check out my online shop, www.karenholtonhealthcoach.com, to find Zendome's orgone generators, comfort crystals, and an array of vital services, all designed to help you to become the change that you wish to see in the world. Now, more than ever, people are awakening to a world we never imagined possible. In response, Dave and I are offering tools, methods, and podcast content to assist you with your awakening process. You are not alone, and there is still much we can do to support our health, emotions, and our spirituality. We both combine ancient wisdoms with cutting-edge technology to help bring comfort to your body, happiness to your mind, and joy to your spirit. To assist you with your life journey, check out my website and find many valuable resources. There's the 9 Steps to Quantum Health Transformation. This is a free, comprehensive online course. Learn about detoxification and nutrition, grounding and spiritual practices, and an advanced version of the Law of Attraction, giving you more of what you really want out of life. I also have my Zendome's Orgonite, which is my unique brand of orgone generators. They're ethically sourced and handmade by a friend of mine, and they're double charged for maximum effect. I also carry comfort crystals, which is a limited collection of energetically infused semi-precious stones. I have an array of vital services, so you can get the one-on-one support that you've been looking for. Also coaching, guidance, and I do assessments and also workshops. And then again, there are the many free resources available on my website. Wisdom to assist with energetic ascension into physical, mental, and spiritual paradise. Also, check out Dave's services. Dave can teach you about astrology and spiritual concepts, principles of Eastern medicine, birth charts, relationship matching, spiritual guidance, fasting, and his unique approach to health. You can find Dave's services on his Facebook page, Instagram at Dave Petrella 12, and his YouTube channel. The links can be found in the description box below. Let us share our quantum work with you. It's your turn to heal, evolve, and thrive. Believe in your ability to succeed. Now, let's get back to the show.
Yeah. And in fact, I'm glad that you brought that up too, because, it's very typical to find sacred sites. And, if you if you're already researching some of these things, you know that many of the sacred sites from around the world that are really quite famous have had newer structures built on top of them over time. And so the people will go to sites like this, and then they'll kind of add to them, or they'll create their civilization around this because they want to make use of the energy that's already present. And so that's kind of what I felt like was going on here, is that's something that was done sort of over time. They created, a village to kind of be around the site. And sometimes the original uses for these sites was something that wasn't meant to host people as a civilization. It was meant to be for ceremonial use, or just, particular alignments drawing in certain energies for a particular reason. So if people just start coming in and then they're living on top of them, that can be really potent energy to have to contend with, on a day-to-day basis. And people talk about this in different places where there's vortexes and things like that as well, is that many, indigenous people will tell you, this is a place of, so I'm in North Carolina currently, and people say that about the Asheville and the Western North Carolina areas, that it actually was a place where the people would go for ceremony, and that it wasn't supposed to be lived in, but it was supposed to be visited for that purpose. And so I think this is what happened to many of these places. And so, when you're in a vortex, any kind of energetic vortex is going to amplify whatever it is that you're experiencing. So if you go in and you're dealing with unresolved trauma and whatever it is, wherever you are in your consciousness, if people are still operating from a really base level, aggressive reptile brain kind of place, and they're going to a very high energy sacred spot, it's going to amplify whatever it is that you're already being within yourself. And so I think, with some of these sites, people might go in and then their characteristics are kind of blown up because they're not in that centered place, and they don't realize that this is not a place to just hang around. It's not like a place of just living your life, and I think obviously the root of it is that all life should be seen as sacred, right? That's really at the core of it. But I think because these are places of, intersecting nodal points, high energetic springs of energy, and that's why, there's oftentimes, like you said, that river is right there. I think that if people are not in their center, it can definitely amplify that type of thing, and that can sometimes create, disharmony among people if they're not in the right space. So anyway, I that's my perspective. I did feel that, and I think that may have been part of why I got a headache the first couple times, because I wasn't really listening completely when I was there. I was just kind of going there like, okay, I'm going to share my blessing and then I'll receive whatever's here to receive, but I wasn't like really acutely listening. And so I think there was still some density to be worked through. And I don't know about you, Dave, but sometimes I feel like I'm called to some of these areas to actually go in and help transmute and clean up the energy. Sometimes I'm asked to do ceremony at these places where, really bad things have happened and the energy is funky. And I'm like, this is what I'm being asked to do. Okay. And then I realize like, okay, you're being asked to go in and support this place because it was sacred. It is sacred. And it's asking for that to really be cleaned up and remembered, so.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. We actually went to a site in North Carolina, right, Aurora, and we did some of that, giving the site what it needed, the attention and maybe some adjustment of energy. And I was expecting to feel not great there, and I actually felt completely fine. I would even say I felt good. I was, and see, that's a good example, guys. I was shocked myself. I mean, when I say I didn't have a bias, but I had an idea of what I was expecting, and I was completely wrong. I went to this is called Jutaculla Rock in North Carolina, and it felt fine. I felt great. I thought we all felt pretty good, right?
Yeah,
Aurora?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, and one of the things that I got from that place too, and I won't go too far into it, but just that I think places like that have been misunderstood because maybe there's stories from people in the area saying, oh, this is what I've experienced. And maybe those people aren't going in with an open mind, like what we're talking about, and in a respectful kind of way to hear the truth of what, and so that area, was associated with a giant. And many of these spots in the Midwest are as well. And so people looked at the track record of some giants throughout history and they go, oh, it must have been a terrible beast, and then that energy gets projected at that site.
That's right.
So,
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't endemic to the site, and it's actually being projected through consciousness onto the site, but it's not supposed to be there really. It's someone putting their own perceptions on it. That can, if that's strong enough, that can actually influence the general character of the site. And
Yeah.
I think both me and Aurora would we can pick up on which one it is. Where is this coming from? Sometimes it's from the people who are living in the area. Sometimes it's not even the site. And it's always back when I started my research, I wanted it to be simple, but it's really generally not. You have to go in open-minded and just feel everything out. And sometimes it takes a couple days or maybe a few weeks to actually determine what you think happened. But that's really well said, Aurora. That's just fantastic. I agree, 100%. Do we have a couple more, Karen? Maybe one more of Ostalon? I'm trying to remember here. Okay. All right. So before we go to Baraboo, Karen, do you want to add anything or comment on anything?
No, not really. It's all very, very interesting. I agree with what you have said, especially about, treating these places as, with respect, and, I totally agree with that. One question I do have, but maybe you're going to cover it down the road a bit, has anybody gone and scanned any of these mounds to see what's underneath? So what I'm wondering is, could there be megalithic sites underneath, or are there giant bones of bodies under there? Like, what's under there? Has anybody done any kind of investigating into that?
So,
Go ahead, Aurora.
I don't know everything, and I don't know all of the work that's been done. And I'm not a geologist myself. I'm not an archaeologist, so I can't speak to it completely. But what I do know is that there have been sites in the area that have unearthed giant remains. And when I say giant, that's anywhere from like 7 feet up to, now I don't remember the tallest, but it was like something otherworldly, like beyond 12 feet tall. So there definitely have been those remains found, and there's many stories. A lot of people think that it's possible that the Smithsonian kind of came in and swept up everything and then took away the evidence. And I'm not one to go down the roads of speculation without knowing for sure. But there are photographs, there are actual records of newspapers, like I said, that go back into the 1800s, that show that these were things that were actually happening. And there was a trend of it being in that mound culture along the Ohio River Valley, Mississippi River area, that there were a lot of remains in that way. Now, as far as each individual mound, I know that now that they're being protected, it's a lot harder to do any kind of, I don't think people are excavating at all. I know that there was a time when, farmers just looked at these mounds because they were in the thousands and thousands of these mounds as basically agricultural roadblocks, and that many of them just got plowed down because they weren't seen and protected, by the people. I don't know about any kind of ground penetrating radar stuff. I'm not sure who's done any kind of work into that. But that I'm definitely interested if there have been people. So if anyone listening does know anything about that, I would love to hear. Please comment, please share with us. I would love to know more information.
And the GPR and stuff, a lot of times you need a fair amount of funding to get something like that off the ground. A lot of times it's based on that. It's not really cheap, I don't think. I'm sure that I know there's been some site surveys. I just don't know the depth either. So yeah, definitely let us know if someone knows about that. I'd be interested in seeing a site map or something. Okay, so we have what do we have, like half hour to 45 minutes, I think, Karen. So let's we got a few more sites to get through.
We've just barely got half hour left.
All right, so let's see if we can get through what we got left, Aurora. I think there's 3 or 4 more, so let's spend 7-8 minutes on each if we can. Let's see if we can get through. All right, so Baraboo, this is a town that Aurora grew up in, right?
Correct.
Okay, it's one of the weird things about it is that it's actually, and I was surprised about this, it's actually the winter home of the Barnum and Bailey Circus. Is that correct?
The Ringling Brothers. So
Okay.
they worked together at different times, but yes, so the Ringling Brothers, and they were all Freemasons. Al Ringling, who was kind of like the face of the whole Ringling operation, to my knowledge, was a 33rd degree Mason, which is interesting that he would choose this location above other locations.
Oh yeah.
As a winter home. Also, winter home for the circus is kind of strange because it gets so cold.
Yeah, it's a very weird thing. And actually, one of the ladies I was talking to when I was in town told me that she lived right by the river. Again, here we go with the river. It's right by the big top is right next to the river right there.
Yeah.
And she said, yeah, out our back door, we used to see elephants actually bathing in the river and everything, just walking down there and bathing themselves. So it's like a very magical area. Aurora's right. There's people are picking up on all the different activity that happened here through the years. Really interesting things. We've got, I think we can go to the next slide, Karen. We've got a man mound, I believe, up next here. And this is a site, it's in Baraboo. It's just kind of just outside the city, right, Aurora? Just to the side there.
Yep, just right out of town. Mm-hmm.
And it's a very large effigy mound of essentially a humanoid figure. I wouldn't call it a man necessarily. It's not quite human, but
No.
it's quite large. I mean, it's, I don't know, 40, 50 feet long, something like that, maybe a little bit more. And it actually crosses they put a road through. They destroyed part of its legs, actually. And so what they did is they painted the road where the leg used to be. And then the feet are kind of hanging out on the other side. It actually goes through a ditch, and then it goes down through a ditch, and then the feet are back up on the bank on the other side. So it's a really interesting sight.
Yeah.
But let's see what other pictures we got here, and then I'm interested in your take on it. Okay, this is the head, so it's kind of upside down here. You see the shoulders and the arms, and the head. He's got like these kind of wings on his head, or almost, or something of that nature. I was getting this really interesting channeling from actually Romania, believe it or not, and it's a very obscure thing for me to think of out of nowhere. But it was also kind of going along with something that was on the radio, and I was like, no, I looked later, and Romania is, I think, about the same latitude as Wisconsin. So when you talk about ley lines and energetic, where beings feel comfortable and stuff, I think we have some of that going on here. But I felt again, I was really hesitant to go here, and I asked Aurora, I'm like, is it good energy? Because if it's not, I don't want to be here. She said, yeah, it's good, it's great. So I went. I'm like, yeah. Oh, she's right. I felt nothing weird at all. I really was, even when this was on Ancient Aliens too, guys. This was featured on an episode of Ancient Aliens. So I'd been wanting to go, but I actually did not go because I was concerned that there would be problems with the energy. And it was not. Totally fine. I would even say it was good. So again, I was completely wrong. And that's why it's so important to go to the site. What else we got, Karen? There's a couple more pictures here. All right, so that's just the sign. Obviously, when you approach the mound, there's a tiny little dirt area. It's not even really a parking lot. You just kind of pull in. I think we got a few more pictures here. Let's see what else we got. That's the plaque. That's a dedication plaque when they dedicated it a while back. I think it was like in the 19-teens or something, right, Aurora? A long time ago.
Yes. Yeah. And you want to, well, let's see. So located, plated. So it looks like 1859 was when they made the official first dedication. So,
Okay.
but pay attention to the shape of the head. Just pay attention to that as you look at these depictions.
All right, so what else we got? Oh, okay. So this one, I took this one. The reason I took this is to show you the distribution of effigy mounds. I think it's actually any kind of mound throughout southern Wisconsin. You guys can see that they're absolutely everywhere, like Aurora was talking about. I'm sure some of them have not even been really looked at closely, but that's a map to give you guys an idea. All right, we got a few more pictures here of Man Mound, I think. It's just trying to show you, it's not high, huge elevation off the ground. It's only like maybe 2 or 3 feet high or something, maybe if that. Maybe, like Aurora said, it's probably used to be higher, to be honest, and it probably got eroded. What else we got here? It's just another view of it. You can kind of see it rising up from the land. It's hard to get a good picture unless you're like above it with a drone or something, but I did the best I could.
And there's certain times of year, like in the late fall, they'll do a controlled burn so that the area is, they burn off basically the tall grasses and whatever has been growing on it. And then they let that grow up during the summer usually. So I guess it looks like maybe they mowed, but yeah. A lot of times they'll let it grow out so that there's more dimension that you can actually see.
I actually saw that what Aurora's describing at Iowa at the Effigy Mounds National Monument. It's actually on the Iowa quarter. If you guys collect quarters or anything, you can see that one on the back of it. That's the way they did it, Aurora, too, is that they actually just let the grass grow tall on the mound so you can see the delineation, with that. And I think they work with natives to decide that that's how they wanted to preserve it, which I really appreciate. Not just people let's do it whatever way we want,
Yeah.
All right, I got a couple more, Karen. What else we got here for the for Man Mound? Okay, this is the road. You can see the legs. That's where the legs used to be, guys, and they put a road through it. And so they actually just painted the leg on the road. It's very, very, very unlike anything I've ever been to. It's very interesting. All right, I think there's one more maybe. What do we got here? Maybe the feet. Yep, you can see the feet they let grow like that Aurora's talking about. It's got the grasses raised up and everything. And it goes, across that ditch. Are there any others for that one, Karen? I think that might be the. All right, so let's so anyway, Aurora, what's your take on Man Mound?
Yeah, so when
who is that humanoid?
Well, this is the interesting story. So what I was sharing earlier about the water spirits guiding the wolf clan inland to safe ground. Many of the indigenous people will tell you that Man Mound was basically a tribute to the water spirits. And if you pay attention to the direction of the feet, that's why they're pointing east, is because it was like the pilgrimage or the voyage from that coastline inland to the area. So, and now if you look at the size and stature, obviously, not everything is to scale when people are making sculptures and artwork and things like that. But the fact that they went out of their way to make this as big as they did, and the shape that it's in, it's not just a regular head. Some people say horns, but I don't necessarily get the horn vibe myself. No. Like it's some kind of formation that was part of the head itself, maybe ears, or I don't know, but yeah.
It would be like one of those aquatic animals that have the appendages on their head, like a squid or an octopus style, something like that, since you're saying it's a water spirit.
That very well could be, yeah.
For some reason, I felt it was like some kind of like wings or something, which is kind of weird, but maybe also antenna or something. I have no idea. But right. It was kind to me. It was very kind to me, and I'm very pleased with that because I was totally wrong. So.
And some places too, like when it comes to, we were talking about giants before, I was rewatching an episode of, oh gosh, I can't remember the name of it, but it was actually aired on the History Channel. And a gentleman was going onto a guy's property in the Midwest who had found giant remains, and they basically officials came in and they said, you've got to cover this up. You can't dig here. This is a no dig zone, So it's like anytime that people do go in and they're trying to get to the bottom of, the truth of everything, people kind of rush around and try to just, cover everything up. So it's kind of unfortunate. I do understand that people do need to go in and not disrespect, the area. And so, I don't know that I would want people excavating digging up when it comes to sacred sites. But when it comes to, finding remains and things like that, I think that should be open to exploration, because I think everybody deserves to know where we've come from,
Definitely. Yep. Okay, so we'll this is Devil's Lake State Park. This is, I believe, just south of Baraboo. I hope I'm correct, Aurora, right? Just to the
Yeah.
south. It's actually kind of adjoining. It's like right next to it, basically.
Yeah, it's part of Baraboo. It's kind of, yeah.
Yep. So this is it the Rock Hawk? Is that what it's called? Effigy?
So this is Thunderbird Mound, or Bird Mound. So
Okay,
this
so
is actually, this is what they modeled the mascot of the high school and the middle school after, is this mound right here.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you told me that.
And it's interesting because so this is pretty huge. Again, like Man Mound, I believe, is like 47 feet long. This is also a very, very large mound. And they're kind of reminiscent of some things that you might see in Nazca, Peru,
Oh, totally.
The Nazca lines and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and this one, when I was at Aurora, it did have the grasses growing on it, just like you were describing before. So it's the same. It's interesting because it's right next to the lake. It's also right at the base of this big mountain, which we're about to climb up through the pictures here, and that's kind of where I want to go to, because it gets pretty exciting as we make the hike. And it's a fairly steep hike. I was not really prepared for the steepness, to be honest with you, and it's a little bit precarious. I wouldn't necessarily bring everyone up there. You really gotta be like sure on your feet. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, a good fair amount of conditioning, right?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. So there's lots of rock. There's lots of big loose stones. A lot of them it's like, rock piles, rock jumbles. We can go to the next slide, Karen, too.
So I'll also mention too, really quick, that this was another one of those sites that kind of was transformed in its name to kind of, I think, suit tourism, really. So, Devil's Lake was originally called Spirit Lake, but I think when, many of the European people came in and they saw these places and some of the strange anomalies and lights in the sky and strange spiritual things happening that they weren't accustomed to. I think between that and just trying to make it seem more interesting to people, they changed the name to Devil's Lake. So I still call it Spirit Lake. So if you hear me talking Spirit Lake, that's what I'm talking about, is this place.
Yeah, and I agree. A lot of times it's just to sensationalize it, to make it something it's not. I really do not like when people do that, to be honest. I mean, just leave it as it is, guys. Come on. I know it's unexplained. There's maybe some weird stuff that doesn't make it bad. And actually, I didn't feel, again, at this site, I did not feel anything bad. I was actually very peaceful. It's a very powerful area. And as we go, we can go to the next slide too, Karen. And there's rocks that look like heads, essentially. This to me is essentially the battling giants. I mean, there's no question that's what it looks like to me. And we know that there's lots of stories about giants in the area, like Aurora's already been talking about. Even my friend, who's part of a native tribe in Wisconsin, his tribe talks about the giants. So sometimes when I look at something like this, I think, well, first of all, I'll tell you what I don't think. I don't think that was naturally just deposited like that, whether by a glacier or something else. That's been like carved. It's like engineered. And I'm not saying with hand tools. I think two things. I think, for lack of a better word, I actually think magic. There's lots of stories about turning beings into stone, especially from the UK. And then the other thing I think about is tidal floods, and essentially you're covered with silt for 10,000 years or whatever, and you turn into rock. It might have been a carbon-based body that got turned into rock, and then it got eroded away. I have no idea, but it's very powerful up here, right, Aurora?
Yeah. I mean, I think, yeah, Powerful is an understatement for me. So this is a site that when I first moved there when I was 12 years old, that was my retreat. That was the place that I would go, just to be by myself, to have reflection, those types of things. Little did I know at the time, like it didn't fully register at the time that it was a sacred site and what all of that meant. I just knew that I liked being there. And so the more that I kind of dug into it, they call this Devil's Doorway. I call it Spirit Doorway, obviously, Spirit Lake. But there's doorways, there's places like this all over the world that are associated with megalithic structures, that many people feel that it's very possible that they could be portals or doorways to another dimension, whether it's some kind of Stargate or a more terrestrial kind of portal that could lead to another part of the world. The thing that we don't really know at this time is, what was going on in terms of travel at that time in history. So, and I mean, who knows how long this has been there. People locally will tell you that they are glacial anomalies. So now what you're not seeing is that these rocks are situated on the edge of a cliff overlooking this beautiful lake. So how really, that got out there.
Really high.
Oh, really? Yeah, pretty high. And you wouldn't think in Wisconsin, of all places, that there's going to be places of this height and megalithic structures of this stature. Now, what's interesting is that there have been certain places, specifically in this area around like the Great Lakes region, that have also been associated with some of the resources that have been found in different places in Egypt. And so one of the things that I've heard, and I can't verify this one for certain, I remember hearing it, but I couldn't find the resource where I had heard this originally, but that the granite that's found in this region, that's also very prolific in the area of the spring, which is the local spring called Rock Springs. There's a place there called Abelman's Gorge. There's a big rock quarry there with all of this amazing granite. It's some of the purest granite and the highest vibrating. So if you're talking about stone that has high piezoelectric effect, granite is huge because it contains so much quartzite. And so it was oftentimes used in sacred sites because it is a conduit, right, for electricity, for energy. And so there have been reports that some of this granite from this region has also been found in Egypt, as well as the Isle Royal in the northern part of Michigan, which is the island. It's in Lake Superior. And that has some of the purest copper in the world. And that copper has been for certain identified in Egypt, which is, I mean, it's interesting. So you have to wonder, was there greater technology they were getting around by means other than boats? Or at the time, were the continents actually closer together? Was there, the idea of Pangea or whatever, different things like that. So, but the site is interesting. And oftentimes when you find a doorway, there's oftentimes some kind of indicator on the doorway that look like a key or something to activate the site. And they're usually aligned to different directions or cosmological alignments. And this also has a place underneath. So that's my daughter in the photo. Underneath her hand, on the right side, so it'd be her left hand, but if you're looking on the right, there's one kind of square looking stone and then a smaller stone. Think of the weight that tiny little stone is bearing. Just think about that. Now there's so many sites like this, like Coral Castle, that it was actually built in modern times, that this man, Ed Leedskalnin, figured out how to build his site on an energetic intersection where he was able to move stones with no trouble at all. And so, your idea about it, having could have very well had to do with the giants is a great indicator. But underneath my daughter's hand there, so there's that tiny stone, and then there's the flat part that's actually, there's a hollow there. Now you can actually climb into the hollow on the right, but the hollow on the left that's between her and that flat stone is something that I found that's a little, it's like a spiral. And now there's a possibility this could be water erosion. I'm not negating that, but I found it interesting because at so many of these other sites that are known to be portals or doorways, that there are oftentimes these little indicators that you can find that are some kind of key. And it does look like either some kind of petroglyph or some kind of key, it being a spiral. So I thought that was really interesting. I'm not sure if that made it into the slides, but that's what that is about.
What else do we have for pictures? Yeah, we have, there you go.
Yeah, so it's hard to tell from the photo because of the lighting and stuff like that, but there is a sort of spiral formation, and or the idea of it looking like a fingerprint almost.
I actually also see, that was weird. I see like a rhinoceros's head or something. He's got his eyes kind of closed. Yeah, that might even be an animal indication or something. But yeah, there's something going on there. There's no question to me. It's obvious. All right, what else we got, Karen? I think we got a couple more from, this one. All right, let me just explain this really fast, and then Aurora can. And I think we're getting towards the end of the show here, but this is the same thing. It's right on the edge of the cliff. It's actually balanced. That rock is, maybe 2/3 on sitting on the rock, and a third of it is like literally completely over the edge. Yeah. And that one to me is also a giant's head. And from two different angles, actually, I can, go explain how that happens, but it's like two different giants' heads in one or something. But when I first saw Aurora in this picture, I said, wow, okay, there is something very magical about this place, because that does not just happen like that. It's like been placed so that it's hanging precariously on the edge, just about to fall, and it never falls.
Yeah.
Karen, what else we got? A couple more here. What was that? The quarry, Aurora? Was that?
So this is not the quarry. This is actually, it's considered part of Spirit Lake State Park as a whole, but it is, you have to kind of drive around a little bit to find this place. This is Parfrey's Glen. And, you find a lot of these interesting rock formations. You can see the scope of it by the size of myself, looking very enthusiastic underneath. Some of these, they look like skulls, they look like faces. It's curious. And that's not to say that these things can't be natural erosion patterns. I'm not doubting that either, but it is interesting. And especially the fact that many of them are found in many other places, and things that I didn't even include in this slide are other formations in the sandstone. And this is an interesting thing, is that there are only, I want to say, like 3 major sandstone deposits or something in the world. Now, I have to double check that, but it's interesting because there's one that's only about 15-20 minutes away from this site in Baraboo. And sandstone also has very, high piezoelectric properties. And many of those formations in that area, if you go to Lake Delton and the Wisconsin Dells area, there again are many of these formations that they call by different names because they look like, chief heads, they look like animals, but it's pretty, they're pretty convincing. That it's not like guesswork. Like, it looks far more like actual something that's been sculpted.
Everything, I say everything's conscious, including rocks and everything, trees, plants, whatever. So there's so many ways to look at this. I just try to keep everything on the back burner when I might need it, but I don't close the book on the fact that it literally could have been some kind of magic. There was all kinds of magic in the ancient world, guys. Merlin, UK, Stonehenge, all this stuff, levitating stones, Easter Island. So it's definitely in the possibility for me. And I also personally believe the ancient world was very magical. I think the conditions were very different, even the energetic conditions on the earth and how weight was distributed and all this stuff. So it just pays, it'll, the more that you can cover and keep in the back of your mind, it really kind of pays off when you try to figure things out. You can settle on things that you feel like it makes more sense if you're willing to look at other avenues. Okay, this is the top, looking down at the lake. It's quite high. I think we got a couple more here.
There's stories about the lake as well. Some people talk about that there are actual tunnels that lead to other places, to other lakes, which I think is pretty interesting because that kind of corroborates with some of the other ancient tales of giants and cave dwellings and even inner earth, stuff like that. It's pretty fascinating.
Did you have anything specific about this particular rock, Aurora? Because, I'd mentioned for me, it's the giant's head.
Yeah, to me, it really feels like some kind of electromagnetic anomaly. Like there's got to be some kind of convergence of energy here that either allowed it to be placed where it is, or the fact that it's still standing there, or both. It does feel like a still point. So even though, literally, it takes a lot of gumption to get out there on that rock because you are hanging out over nothing. You're on a cliffside right there. So if you can brave it.
I actually did not do that, and Aurora had enough courage to do it. I didn't do it because I'm like, I literally could fall. So
yeah, I don't recommend doing that. I'm not trying to hurt people, but it does have special energy that I just feel like it reminds me of those pens that I remember seeing in like the 80s and 90s, where there were these two coils and essentially the magnetic pens would sort of like hang, in this magnetic field between these two pieces of plastic that had magnets in them. So it's hanging in this magnetic field, and that's what it feels like. It just feels like whoop, like when you get out there, it aligns you in some way. And so you kind of are able to find this sort of still point, which is really cool.
That's really cool. That's really cool to explain it that way. Yeah. All right. So that's a rock from the side, I believe. Yeah, I think I took that one from the side. So I took, I see the faces and all the rocks, and I've seen things from other several different angles. What else we got, Karen? I think we're about at the end here. All right, that's another view. I took that one of what I call the battling giants way up there. It looks like they were like literally frozen in motion. It feels to me like, in Maine, I was at actually the LL Bean store in Maine, and there's moose that were actually, they locked their antlers. They were in the rut. They locked their antlers. They got snowed on, and it like froze, and they were discovered a long time after, and they were literally frozen in motion in the battle. Like, so I just sensed that somehow that was the case. I don't obviously know for sure, but it feels that way to me. It looks like the one guy's got his hand up, like a boxing match to the other guy's head or something. That's what I felt about it. All right, that's from the top again. I think we got maybe one more from Devil's Lake here. All right, I took this. It's just showing you where all the mountains are on the eastern seaboard, and it's absolutely expansive. But then, like I'm saying, it kind of abruptly ends at the western front there. But it goes all the way up, Louisiana to Wisconsin, and all the way kind of east for quite a ways, even down to Florida and everything. I think we only got a couple more slides here. All right, this one, do you want to take like 30 seconds on this, or this is in Muskota, Wisconsin?
Yeah, actually, this is one that I have not been to yet, so I don't have a lot to say from personal experience. I just find it really fascinating, again, that there's another location where there are very, very large mounds that, a lot of them are very similar to what you might see again in places like Nazca and things like that. So there's what they say is that there's a bison, there is a pregnant bird or corn woman, which is an interesting story among indigenous cultures that's worth reading about. A beaver and a coiled serpent.
Okay. Yeah, I almost see like a fish maybe at the top too. I don't know. I'd probably get down closer to it. Definitely a serpent. Yeah, that's really cool. That's kind of how the ones in Iowa look too. I continue from Wisconsin into Iowa, but okay, this is the last site. Did you go to Lizard Mound ever, Aurora?
No, I don't think I did.
Okay, so this was the last one I did. This is just outside Milwaukee, Wisconsin, right in the Great Lake right there. And this is another example of actually effigy mounds. There's a lot of them. There's a real lot of them. And I think the next slide, Karen, I think you can see the ground map. Yeah, there it is. So all of those kind of reddish shaded figures, those are all effigies. A lot of them are birds. The namesake is, excuse me, it's actually a big lizard. And there's a nice little trail around this park. It's, not a huge park. It's actually not easy to find either. I missed it like the first and the second time driving by it, but there's a big lizard effigy, there's bird effigies. There's lots of like cylindrical figures, maybe some serpents or something. There's lots of ways you can look at it, but it's a big cluster of effigy mounds. And it's fairly, it's not really that close to Madison. It's like an hour and a half or an hour 45 minutes to the east. It's all the way outside Milwaukee. So we've kind of, if including Muskota, we've covered pretty much all of southern Wisconsin. And then if you go a little further west, it's the Iowa Effigy Mounds National Monument, which I was describing previously. But this is the lizard mound, kind of how it looks from the trail. It's hard to see the actual effigies, but it's kind of past. They're all kind of past this plant growth. And I like it because it kept it really natural, and you're kind of supposed to stay off the mounds, but you can see everything fairly well. And they do mow over the mounds, so you can see it. And this is showing, I think, one of the bird effigies. So it's just everywhere. It's just unbelievable. What we're missing something. We're missing like this massive culture that existed in the Americas. And even the word Astalon, to me, it sounds like Atlantis or Aslan or something like that, or I think, or even Aswan, in Egypt. And what was that guy's name from the Neverending Story? That dragon, wasn't it something like that?
Falcor.
Okay, that's Falcor. What's the lion's name from Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe? Was he Aslan?
Aslan, yeah.
Okay, so all these references, and when you can put this stuff together, you start thinking, maybe we're talking about something from the deep past, some kind of ancient connections that we're maybe missing out on.
Well, and there's that whole, Mexico, South America connection with Aslan, Aztalan, Atitlan, like they're all connected. It's the same language, it's the same name, and it's the same. To me, I think that they're the same cultures that have just migrated, or I think the Atlantis conversation is definitely one that's too big to cover here today, but I think that there are many connections if you're looking in the mound culture. And and it's interesting too, because the Atlantis connection and the Egyptian connection, all those things, they merge. They all have these points of merging. And even the convergence of the Ohio River and the Mississippi River is a little town called Little Egypt, right? And then there's all, in Memphis, Cairo, there's all these places in that area in the United States that are called by these Egyptian names now. And you're like, I wonder why that is,
Yeah, there's supposedly mummies found outside St. Louis, and it really kind of freaked people out when they were excavating the city or something.
There's some connection. So, some people theorize that it could have been that there may even be Alexander the Great's remains in Illinois.
Okay. Wow. Okay. I've also heard King Arthur in Kentucky. I've heard all kinds of stuff going on.
Wow. Interesting. And like you were saying, the Norse connection, there's been a lot of interesting things that have been found from that region as well. And, like you were saying, the tribes of Israel, Atlantis, there's many, points of speculation, but the more that we do to just listen, like we were talking about in the beginning, like I think the more that we'll be able to uncover. But it's cool to be able to not only be the only one to do it, but to come together like we're doing here today, and to really connect the dots and bring the pieces together, because I think the more that we can come with individually, the more that we can kind of discover as a collective. So
that's right. I agree 100%. It's a team effort, and we all bring our skill sets to the table. And also, I'll remind people too about the previous guest that we had on, Wayne Murphy. His site's also in Wisconsin, and this is a Templar supposedly related site. So somehow the state of Wisconsin was a powerhouse in the ancient world. You know, there's something going on there. I believe there's energy lines, definitely. But I also believe there's a lot of instances where people found things that were much older and then they adapted them. And then they tried to maybe replicate them in their own version, which was like far less of a superiority level, because, you know, it came from someone who, you know, just were trying to copy it. So yeah, all this stuff is definitely in play, and you know, what a great conversation. This was fantastic. I just really appreciate you being here, Aurora, and sharing your knowledge about Wisconsin.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, it's been a real joy. Thank you.
You're
Yeah,
welcome.
really, it's been just amazing information. I really appreciate you being on the show and sharing this with us and the viewers. It's been just very, very interesting. We'll have to have you back in the new year sometime, and we'll continue where we left off.
Thank you. Yeah, love that.
Okay, I guess if you'd like to tell people where they can find you, Aurora, if you got a website, you know.
Thank you. Yeah, you can find me on my website. It's divinealchemytemplearts.com. That's divinealchemytemplearts.com. You can also find me on my YouTube channel, Aurora Alchemy with a K. So it's ALKHEMY, like chem.
Okay, excellent. Any other links? Are you primary one?
Yeah, those are my primaries for now. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sure.
I'll put the links, Aurora, in the description below the video once it's published. So yeah, everybody can find you.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for coming. And Dave, of course, my co-host. I'm very happy to be able to present all kinds of amazing information. And I also encourage you to the viewers to check out my other show called the Quantum Guide Show. And Aurora is going to be back on that show on the 14th, and we're going to talk all about sound healing. But for today, that's about it for us. And we just wish everybody much light and love, and hope you have the best week ever. And we'll see you again next time on Aliens and Astrology. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Aurora. Thanks, Karen.
Thank you for joining Dave and I for the Aliens and Astrology show. Become the change you want to see in the world. Subscribe to our YouTube channels, click the like button, and share this show with your friends. Check out Karen's website at KarenHoltonHealthCoach.com. All the links will be in the description box below. Until the next time, keep up the good work.
Well, you challenge my perception. I shift uneasily as I try to justify how I value your suggestions. Ideas full of life when I'm empty of my own. And 5 minutes before I was okay, now the curtain drops to the floor. Leaves me weak and begging for more. When I think I get it, it flutters and vanishes away.